The sirens were already fading when the helicopter lights cut across the Colorado night. Snow whipped sideways in the wind, flattening the world into a blur of white and steel. Below, a convoy crawled through the mountains in marked vans, armored doors. Windows blacked out like eyes sewn shut. No plates, no insignia, only a destination known to a handful of people who had signed more non-disclosure agreements than wedding licenses. ADX Florence. By the time the vans rolled through the final gate, the man inside the middle vehicle had stopped asking questions. His wrists were off from the cuffs. His ankles ached from the chains. He'd been awake for 36 hours, shuttled between holding cells, interrogations, and sealed rooms where the walls listened better than people did. His name was Evan Mercer. And until 3 days ago, he had been a ghost and intelligence contractor who knew too much and trusted the wrong person. Then, doors slammed open. Cold air rushed in. Mercer blinked, squinting against floodlights that erased shadows. He expected shouting, dogs, chaos. Instead, there was silence, thick, deliberate, engineered. A guard leaned in close and spoke quietly, almost kindly. Welcome to Florence. They walked him down corridors designed to confuse the mind. Turns that went nowhere, doors that opened only to reveal another door. Concrete swallowed sound. Cameras watched everything, and nothing. When the final steel door sealed behind him, the echo lingered like a held breath. The light clicked on. A bed bolted to the floor, a desk. A toilet with no lid. No window, just a slit of frosted glass too high to reach. 23 hours a day alone. No human touch. No voices. This wasn't punishment. This was erasure. 3 days later, Evan Mercer vanished. Officially, he was relocated within the facility, and officially, his cell was empty. Bed stripped, desk bare, no blood, no struggle. Just a thin smear on the concrete where someone had wiped something way too quickly. A janitor found it first. He reported it. The report disappeared. And that's when the call went out. Special Agent Mara Klein had spent her career chasing missing people who didn't want to be found. Organized crime accountants, whistleblowers, runaways with secrets. But this case felt wrong from the first ring of her phone. The request was off books. Routed through a deputy director she didn't trust. The instructions were precise and narrow. Assess. Do not escalate. Do not contact media. Close quickly. When she arrived at ADX Florence, the warden met her at the gate. Thomas Calder. Gray hair clipped short. Smile tight and practiced. He shook her hand like a man who believed firmly in locks. Agent Klein, he said, we take security seriously here. Then you'll understand why I'm asking questions, she replied. Inside, the prison hummed, not with noise, never noise, but with systems. Doors opened and closed on a schedule so exact it felt religious. Guards moved in pairs. Never alone, prisoners passed through hallways and restraints, heads bowed. Faces unseen. It was a place built to deny narratives. No stories. No witnesses. Mercer's file was thin for a man who'd made powerful enemies. Charges related to national security, obstruction, classified material mishandling. Nothing that justified a sudden disappearance. Klein noticed the dates didn't line up. Transfers recorded at times when cameras were supposedly down for maintenance. Maintenance logs signed by the same initials, over and over. She asked to see Mercer's cell. The guard hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Enough. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach. To clean. Klein crouched, running a gloved finger along the base of the wall. She found it where the concrete met steel was scratched, shallow but deliberate. Not random. A symbol, maybe. Or a message unfinished. She photographed it. Who cleaned this cell? She asked. The guard checked his tablet. Facility services. Names. Another pause. Rotational. That night, Klein reviewed camera footage, or tried to. There were gaps, seconds missing, then minutes. In one clip, Mercer walked down a corridor, flanked by guards. In the next, the corridor was empty. No exit, no alarm. It was as if the footage itself had decided to forget him. She requested interviews. The warden allowed two. The first guard remembered nothing unusual. The second remembered too much. He spoke quickly, eyes flicking to the camera in the corner of the room. Mercer asked for a lawyer, he said. Kept saying he had proof, names. Said if anything happened to him, it wouldn't end here. Proof of what? Klein asked. The guard swallowed. That's all I know. Later, alone in her hotel room, Klein listened to the audio again, slowed it down. In the background, beneath the guard's voice, she heard a sound that didn't belong, a low hum, mechanical, steady. The kind you hear near heavy equipment, or underground. The next morning, she pressed Calder. He smiled and deflected. ADX had no underground levels. He said, everything was accounted for. Every inch monitored. Then why do your blueprints stop at sublevel 2? Klein asked, sliding a copy across the table. Why are there sealed doors marked inactive with power draw? Calder's smile didn't move this time. National security. That afternoon, Klein received a message from an encrypted number. One sentence. No greeting. If you want Mercer, stop looking up. Start listening. She returned to the cell block after lights out, escorted by a junior guard who talked too much. As they passed a service corridor, she felt its vibration through her boots. Subtle, constant. A heartbeat beneath the concrete. She stopped. Do you hear that? The guard shrugged. Ventilation. Klein knelt, pressed her ear to the floor. The hum deepened. Resolved into rhythm. Not air, not water. Something moving. She followed it to a door marked storage decommissioned. The lock was newer than the paint. She photographed it. Reached for the handle. Agent, the guard said, voice tight. We're not authorized. Klein straightened. Call the warden. The radio crackled. Static. Then a voice she didn't recognize. Hum. Firm. Agent Klein. Step away from the door. Her phone buzzed. Another message. They built this place so no one could escape. They forgot to make sure no one could disappear. Klein looked at the door again. The hum grew louder, closer now, like machinery waking up. When backup arrived, the lock was warm to the touch. The door opened with a groan that felt like a warning. And when they switched on the lights below, they realized ADX Florence had been hiding more than prisoner. The stairwell dropped deeper than any blueprint said it should. Concrete steps spiraled down into a level untouched by fresh paint or prison polish. They are growing colder with each step. The hum Klein had heard above became a vibration here. Alive and undeniable. It pulsed through the walls like a machine breathing in the dark. The lights flickered on one by one, revealing a corridor narrower than the rest of the prison. No windows. No cameras. Just steel doors spaced evenly apart, each marked with a number that didn't match any ADX registry. This isn't a storage level, Klein said quietly. No one answered her. The guards who had followed her down stood rigid, hands hovering near their weapons, eyes fixed forward. They hadn't been trained for this. None of them had. The first door they opened was empty. A single chair bolted to the floor. Straps dangling loose, leather cracked from age or use. The second held a table scarred with burn marks, a drain cut directly into the concrete beneath it. No medical equipment. No paperwork. No justification. By the third door, one guard stepped back, retching. Inside was a cell unlike any other in ADX Florence. The walls weren't bare concrete, they were layered with soundproofing foam, slashed and torn in places as if someone had clawed at it. In the corner sat a tray with food untouched, mold creeping along the edges. On the wall, scratched deep enough to bleed rust from the steel beneath, was a name. Evan Mercer. Klein felt her pulse spike. He was here. Or someone wanted us to think so, a voice said behind her. Warden Calder stood at the end of the corridor, flanked by men who weren't wearing correctional uniforms. No name tags, no insignia. Their posture was military. Their eyes empty. This area is classified, Calder said evenly. You were not authorized to enter. You told me this level didn't exist. Klein shot back. Calder's gaze flicked to the scratched name, then back to her. It doesn't, not officially. They escorted her out without another word. By the time she reached the surface, Her phone had lost signal entirely that night. Her hotel key no longer worked. The clerk claimed she'd checked out hours earlier. Her rental car was gone. Someone wanted her isolated, just like Mercer. Klein didn't sleep. She replayed everything she'd seen, every gap, every lie. ADX Florence wasn't just a prison, it was a pressure chamber. A place to put people who knew things the government couldn't afford to bury publicly. And Mercer. He hadn't been transferred. He'd been processed. At dawn, she made a call from a payphone to towns over. One person she trusted. Daniel Rourke, an investigative journalist she'd fed tips to for years. Careful ones, safe ones. This time, she gave him everything. If you publish this, they'll come for you, she warned. Rourke laughed softly. They already have. You're not the first to notice Florence's blind spots. He sent her a file within minutes. Redacted documents. Budget lines hidden under infrastructure. Spending. A program name repeated across agencies like a ghost signature. Project Silence Vault. The purpose was vague by design. Containment of non-traditional security threats. No oversight committee. No expiration date. Florence wasn't chosen for its isolation. It was chosen because it was trusted to keep secrets. One document stood out. A transfer order. Stamped with Mercer's name, dated after his supposed disappearance. Destination, SV7. What's SV7? Klein asked over the phone. I think it's what you found underground, Rourke said. And I think Mercer wasn't the first. Before she could respond, the line went dead. Klein felt it then that since investigators get right before everything collapses, she went back to ADX Florence without clearance, slipping in during a shift change. The junior guard from the night before found her in the corridor. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. Neither should that level, she replied. Help me, he hesitated, then nodded. Led her through service tunnels until they reached a door she hadn't seen before. Smaller, heavier. A biometric scanner pulsed red. What's behind it? She asked. The guard swallowed. SV7. They call it the vault. He scanned his thumb. The light turned green. Inside, the corridor widened into something resembling a lab crossed with a bunker. Glass observation panels lined the walls. Behind them, cells. Smaller than standard ADX units. No beds, no toilets. Just harnesses, electrodes. And walls stained dark in places that no amount of cleaning could erase. A man lay in one of the cells, restrained upright, eyes open but unfocused. Tubes ran from his arms into machines that beeped steadily. That's not a prisoner, Klein said. That's an experiment. They don't interrogate here, the guard said. They extract. A scream echoed down the corridor, all sudden, then cut off like a switch flipped. Klein flinched. What do they want from Mercer? She asked. The guard pointed to a central control room. Accords, access codes, people who thought they were untouchable. They reached the room and froze. The monitors were gone, files wiped. Chairs overturned. Someone had cleaned out SV7 fast. On the main console, one file remained open, blinking like a dare. Subject status, active below it. Mercer. Evan Klein's breath caught. Active means alive. A noise sounded behind them. Boots. More than a few. The guard backed away. I didn't know they'd move him. Move him where? Klein asked. Before he could answer, a gunshot cracked through the room. The guard dropped, blood spreading across the floor in a widening pool. Klein dove behind the console as alarms blared for the first time since she'd arrived at Florence. Over the chaos, a familiar voice came through the speakers. Agent Klein, Calder said calmly. You were warned. She grabbed the open file, copying what she could to a drive as footsteps closed in. The last line she saw before the screen went dark sent ice through her veins. Transfer authorized. Offsite continuation. Mercer wasn't just alive. He was being moved. And whatever he knew was valuable enough to kill for, even inside the most secure prison on Earth. Mercer's messages painted a picture far darker than anything Klein had imagined. SV7 wasn't just extracting information. It was mapping human behavior under total isolation, breaking people down. Studying how long it took, how much pressure it required. What truths surfaced when the mind had nowhere left to hide. The goal wasn't intelligence. It was predictability. "They're building models," Rourke said quietly. "Behavioral blueprints. How to dismantle anyone, anywhere, without leaving a mark." Mercer had been a liability because he'd figured it out. Worse, he'd helped design part of it years earlier, believing it was for counterterrorism, when he realized the vault wasn't limited to criminals or extremists. He tried to walk away. ADX Florence became his cage. "They moved him," Klein said, "off-site." Rourke nodded. "I traced the transfer code. It leads to a private airstrip outside Denver. Flight left 20 minutes ago." They drove hard, headlights slicing through the dark. By the time they reached the airstrip, the hangar doors were open, wind whipping loose papers across the tarmac. A small jet sat warming its engines, guards loading sealed crates into the hold, crates that were breathing. Klein didn't hesitate. She ran. Gunfire cracked the night open. Bullets sparked against concrete as she slid behind a fuel truck. Rourke crawled beside her, breath ragged. "We don't win this with force," he said. "We win it by making it loud." Klein pulled the drive from her jacket, the one she'd copied in SV7. "Then start recording." She stepped out from cover, hands raised. "I'm federal," she shouted. "If you move that plane, this goes public." A man emerged from the shadows. Not Calder, but someone higher. Older.com. "Agent Klein," he said. "You've misunderstood your role." "My role is to stop you," she replied. He smiled. "No. Your role was to prove the system works." Behind him, a crate shifted violently. A muffled voice shouted from inside. "They wanted to see how far you'd go." The man continued. "Who you trust. How you'd react when isolated, cut off, threatened. You performed exceptionally." Klein's stomach dropped. "You used me." "We used everyone," he said. "Florence isn't the prison. It's the filter." Rourke streamed everything: live documents, footage, Mercer's messages, the crates, the confession. The man realized it too late. "Shut it down," he barked. "But the internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't stay silent." Sirens wailed in the distance, real ones this time. The guards scattered. The plane never took off. Mercer was pulled from the crate alive, skeletal, eyes burning with something that looked like relief and guilt. Weeks later, hearings were announced. Committees formed. Officials resigned. Project Silence Vault was terminated. ADX Florence released statements promising transparency. The world moved on, as it always does. Klein visited Mercer once, in a medical facility far from Colorado. "They'll bury this," he told her. "Not today, not tomorrow, but they will. Then we keep digging," she said. Mercer shook his head. "You don't understand. Florence was just the prototype." He slid a piece of paper across the table. 3 letters, 2 numbers. SV12. "They don't need prisons anymore," Mercer said softly. "They just need permission." 3 months later, a man disappeared during a routine transfer in a facility that officially didn't exist. No alarms, no witnesses, no record, only silence. And somewhere deep inside ADX Florence, a decommissioned door hummed to life again. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Stay close, hit subscribe. And remember, some prisons don't have walls. The first mistake the government made was believing silence could still control the narrative. For 2 weeks after the hearings, America was loud. News panels argued. Senators denied knowledge with polished outrage. Experts debated whether Project Silence Vault had been an overreach or a necessity. The name ADX Florence trended across platforms, paired with words like torture, black sites, and constitutional collapse. Then, just as suddenly, the noise faded. No arrests followed, no trials. The committees postponed findings pending further review. Funding documents vanished behind classification stamps. Witnesses recanted or stopped answering calls. And slowly, predictably, the public moved on to the next crisis. Mara Klein did not. She resigned from the Bureau the morning her clearance was temporarily suspended. No explanation, no appeal. Her badge was taken with an apology that sounded rehearsed. When she walked out of the building, she felt lighter and far more exposed. Daniel Rourke wasn't as lucky. He died in a car accident on a rain-soaked highway outside Baltimore. Single vehicle, No skid marks. The police report concluded he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Mara read the report twice. Then a third time, the coroner listed blunt force trauma as the cause of death. But the photographs told a different story. Rourke's hands were bruised, wrists ringed with dark impressions as if he'd been restrained. There was a faint puncture mark just below his jaw. Small enough to miss if you weren't looking for it. She was looking. At the funeral, men in dark suits stood apart from the mourners, watching. One of them met her eyes and nodded, slow and deliberate. A message, not a greeting. "We see you." Mercer disappeared again 3 days later. This time, it was quieter. No alarms, no crates. Just an empty hospital room and a nurse who insisted he'd been discharged under federal authority. The signature on the paperwork was a stamp illegible and traceable. Mara broke into Mercer's storage locker that night. Inside was a notebook he'd kept hidden during recovery. No names, no locations, just patterns, timelines, facility layouts sketched from memory. And one phrase written over and over again, growing darker, heavier, as the pages went on. Back into the world. Changed. Predictable. Quiet. A man behind the glass rocked back and forth, whispering to himself. Another stared straight ahead, eyes unblinking, electrodes tracing his scalp. "This is what Florence taught them," Mercer continued. "Isolation isn't about punishment. About rewriting." A siren sounded low, controlled. Mercer cursed. "They know you're here." They ran. Corridors sealed behind them as they moved, systems adjusting in real time. The facility was alive in a way Florence had never been. Adaptive. Learning. Gunfire echoed. Men fell. Mercer dragged Mara through a maintenance shaft barely wide enough to breathe. "Why show me this?" she demanded between gasps. "Because I'm not getting out again," he said. "And you're the only variable they haven't neutralized." They reached a control hub overlooking the entire level. Mercer slammed the door shut and began typing commands with shaking hands. "What are you doing?" Mara asked. "Breaking the pattern." He looked at her then, really looked. And she understood. "You're going to lock yourself in." "I already am." The alarms grew louder. Footsteps thundered outside. "This system needs subjects," Mercer said. "But it also needs silence. I'm about to make it very loud." He handed her a drive. Heavier than the last. Everything. Names, locations, live feeds. Proof that couldn't be buried. "Go," he said. Mara hesitated. "Come with me." Mercer smiled faintly. Florence never let anyone escape. That was the lie. The truth is worse. The door buckled. Mara ran. Above ground, the desert was quiet again. Too quiet. She didn't look back when the explosion rolled beneath the sand, collapsing SV-12 into itself. The drive went public an hour later. This time, there was no fading. Facilities were found, ships seized, names exposed. Protests erupted across continents. Courts reopened cases thought long dead. But even as the system cracked, Mara knew something else was true. Silence hadn't been defeated. It had adapted. Months later, while reviewing reports from a newly uncovered site, she noticed a familiar detail. A decommissioned door, a low mechanical hum, and a designation scratched into steel. SV-15. The system was still learning. And somewhere, another prison with no escape was already waiting. If you think this story ends here, you're listening to the wrong silence.